Angela Turner had always known that hard work and steady focus could open doors that many assumed were shut forever. When she first arrived at Riverside Community Bank as a junior analyst, she carried a small leather briefcase, a notepad full of carefully kept ideas, and the quiet confidence of someone determined to prove herself by action rather than talk. Her first weeks were a blur of learning curve charts, balance sheets, and late-night review sessions. She soaked up every detail like a sponge, asking questions in a polite tone, but never giving the impression of weakness. In a world where many saw her age and her race before anything else, she preferred to let her results do the talking. Within 2 years, Angela had moved up to a senior analyst role. She was known for spotting trends before they became obvious, predicting small shifts in market sentiment that translated into real profit opportunities for the bank. Her managers began to trust her instincts, sending her on special assignments to review underperforming branches and suggest changes. She traveled across towns and small cities, listening to local managers' concerns, shaking hands with small business owners, and taking notes on worn desks and windowless back offices. She treated every person with respect, inviting their input and valuing their experience. Word spread quickly that her reports were fair and actionable. It's not merely academic exercises. By the time she turned 40, Angela had earned promotions that took her through risk management, strategic planning, and client relations. She learned to navigate the subtle politics of the boardroom, where voices rose and fell over matters of reputation, profitability, and balance. She discovered that persuasion required not just clear data, but empathy and timing. She once convinced a skeptical director to approve a modest loan to a new tech startup by inviting the director to a late-night tasting at a small downtown cafe, where the owner shared stories of risk, creativity, and community value. After that meeting, the director asked Angela for more information, never doubting her judgment again. When the previous CEO announced his retirement, Angela's name was among those floated for consideration. Felt she was too young, or had not spent enough time in traditional revenue generation roles. Others whispered that the bank was not ready for a black leader at the top. But Angela's record spoke loudly, under her guidance. The bank's risk-adjusted return on capital had risen steadily. Non-performing loans had fallen to their lowest level in a decade, and customer satisfaction surveys showed a clear uptick across urban and rural branches alike. The community had begun to view Riverside as a stable, as a trustworthy partner in growth. The board's vote to appoint Angela was not unanimous, but it was decisive. When the formal announcement came, employees at every level felt a ripple of excitement. Some organized an informal celebration in the trading room at noon, bringing sandwiches and homemade cookies. Others sent messages of congratulations that poured in faster than the bank's email servers could handle. Local news outlets ran brief profiles, highlighting her rise from small-town roots to the helm of a multi-billion-dollar institution. For Angela, the moment held deep significance. She thought of her parents, who had worked 2 jobs each to pay for her education, and of the mentors, many from minority backgrounds, who had told her that excellence was the best argument against bias. In her first speech as CEO, Angela chose simplicity over grandiosity. She acknowledged the shoulders she stood upon and the responsibilities she accepted. She spoke of customers and employees as partners, not statistics. She promised to maintain the bank's strong regulatory record, while also exploring new ways to extend credit and support underserved communities. Many listeners remembered how she had, as chief risk officer, visited daycare centers in disadvantaged neighborhoods to assess small loan applications, sitting cross-legged on tiny chairs to talk with directors. Now she stood on a polished stage, confident that empathy and prudence could walk together. Over the next year, her leadership approach unfolded in tangible results. She launched a program to streamline loan approvals for minority-owned small businesses, cutting decision times in half. She revamped the bank's online portal, making it easier for elderly customers to pay bills and transfer funds without frustration. She encouraged branch managers to devote 1 day each month to community outreach, attending church meetings, farmers markets, or local high school career fairs. At each stop, Angela made sure someone from senior management was present, signaling That the bank's top team genuinely cared about people's everyday challenges? Colleagues often remarked that Angela had a gift for balancing ambition with caution. She would greenlight promising projects, but only after insisting on clear metrics, stress tests, and contingency plans. During a volatile quarter in the commodities market, she personally oversaw scenario analyses, pacing the trading floor. In comfortable loafers, listening as traders explained their strategies. When she asked her risk management team to run a worst-case light scenario on a large agricultural loan portfolio, traders looked at one another in surprise. But the analysis revealed a hidden vulnerability, prompting a small hedge. That later saved the bank millions when grain prices shifted unexpectedly. Meanwhile, Martin Carlyle of White Rock Holdings emerged as one of her bank's most prominent clients. He was well known in financial circles for his assertive style and substantial investments. Angela had first met him at a conference in New York, where he had complimented her on an article she'd written about responsible lending. Over time, she handled several of his large accounts, always ensuring that his transactions complied with both internal policy and regulatory guidelines. Carlyle respected her professionalism, and she respected his ambition, provided it remained within the bank's risk parameters. By the time Angela's third year as CEO rolled around, Riverside Community Bank's assets had grown from $2 billion to $5 billion. Remarkable feat, given the slow growth environment of regional banking. Shareholders celebrated steady dividend increases. Regulators praised the bank's strong liquidity ratios, and customers enjoyed expanded service hours and added mobile banking features. Her story became something of a case study in business schools, how a leader who combined analytical skill, emotional intelligence, and a sincere commitment to fairness could achieve outstanding performance. Yet beneath the surface calm, a storm was gathering. Martin Carlyle, emboldened by his success with the bank, began to make subtle demands. He wanted faster approvals for certain derivatives trades, and he whispered to board members that a different leadership style, one he described as more traditional, would suit his larger vision. At board dinners, some members listened politely while others frowned, sensing an undercurrent of racial bias. Angela heard rumors that Carlyle had privately told people the bank needed a white face for high-stakes deals. She chose not to confront him publicly, preferring to let her track record stand up for itself. On the morning of the fateful board meeting, Angela arrived early. She dressed in a navy suit she knew conveyed competence without ostentation. In the lobby, she exchanged polite greetings with security officers who had known her since she was an analyst. She paused by a large window overlooking the city skyline, taking a deep breath. She believed in the value she brought to the bank and in the integrity of her leadership. But she also knew that high finance could turn on a word or a whisper. Board members entered the room one by one. The meeting began with routine financial reports. Angela presented her quarterly update, fielding questions with calm clarity. Everything seemed on track. Then Carlyle stood up, his posture rigid. He requested private time with the board. What followed was a closed-door session. Angela waited outside, acutely aware of the ticking clock on her phone. She thought of all the progress she had led, of the lives improved by the bank's loans and services. She believed that fairness and profit were not mutually exclusive. As minutes stretched into half an hour, she wondered if prejudice had finally found its moment. When the board reconvened, the atmosphere had shifted. Carlyle laid out his demand. Angela must be replaced by a leader who better aligns with my vision. He used phrases like cultural fit and client comfort. Some board members protested quietly. Others exchanged anxious glances. Angela stood, composed, as her supporters on the board argued her case, pointing to growth figures, risk management successes, and the outpouring of community goodwill. But Carlyle's influence loomed large. The board chair called for a vote. In a narrow decision, Angela learned that power could be overshadowed by prejudice. Even when every spreadsheet and every praise spoke her name, as she gathered her things and walked out of the boardroom, Angela felt a quiet storm of emotion, shock, disappointment, but also resolve. She remembered why she had started this journey, to open doors for herself and for those who would follow. Even as she faced the blow of an unjust dismissal, she carried the knowledge that her legacy was more than a title. It was the record she built, the trust she earned, and the barriers she broke for others. And although the moment was painful, she believed that her true ascent was not defined by a single door, but by every life she had touched and every change she had inspired. After the shock of Angela's removal settled, there came a day when Martin Carlyle asked for a special meeting with the board. The request landed in the chair's inbox late on a Friday afternoon, framed as urgent but without explanation. Board members read the note twice. Some frowned, others sighed. They knew Carlyle held a large account with the bank. Losing his business could cost Riverside millions. Still, they wondered why he would summon them at such short notice. On Monday morning, the board gathered in the tall glass room on the top floor. The light from the city windows made the polished oak table shine. Carlyle arrived first. He wore his usual dark suit and crisp white shirt. He placed a slim folder on the table and looked around with a steady gaze. A few board members gave polite nods. Then Carlyle spoke in a calm voice. He praised the bank's growth under Angela Turner, saying she had led with skill and drive. His tone held just enough warmth to be confusing. The board relaxed slightly. Then Carlyle shifted. He opened his folder and slid it across the table. Inside were charts and notes from recent transactions. He pointed to a line showing large trades approved without his direct sign-off. "These moves," he said, "have made me uneasy." He spoke of fit and tone, using words that sounded harmless but felt loaded. A board member asked what he meant by uneasy. Carlyle paused, his eyes meeting each face. "I need a leader who shares my vision at every level. Someone who moves with the same style and background as my team." The room went silent. A director cleared his throat. He noted that Angela had always followed the bank's rules and protected Carlyle's interests. Carlyle nodded but said, the rules were not enough. He wanted a leader who could anticipate his needs without questions. The board chair exchanged glances with the vice chair. Both knew Carlyle's portfolio was worth more than $200 million. They felt the weight of his words. One by one, they asked Carlyle if he would really pull his funds. He answered with quiet confidence, "Yes, if the bank does not meet my request. I will withdraw my deposits and move my trades elsewhere." The threat felt like ice in the boardroom. The air grew heavy. A younger director spoke up, calling the demand unfair and arbitrary. She pointed out that Angela had built trust through clear data and careful planning. Carlyle smiled politely but repeated his stance. He claimed that client comfort was vital in today's competitive market. By comfort, he made it clear he referred to more than strategy. The board members shifted in their chairs. They knew where this was headed. Outside the room, Angela waited in a small anteroom. She had been told the board needed a private session first. She paced on the dark carpet, her shoes soft against the floor. Her mind replayed every successful quarter she had led. She thought of the new loans she had approved, the customers she had visited, and the community programs she had started. She believed in her work and her team. Yet now she faced the reality that prejudice could sometimes sway business decisions more than performance. Inside, the boardroom voices rose in quiet debate. Some directors argued that giving in to Carlyle would set a dangerous precedent. Others worried that losing his business would trigger more withdrawals from other large clients. They asked what the bank's reputation would suffer if they stood firm. Carlyle listened without interrupting, his calm presence a silent reminder of his power. After half an hour of tense discussion, the chair called for a vote. Papers rustled as directors marked yes or no. The vote was close. In the end, 5 directors supported Carlyle's demand, and 4 opposed it. The decision was made. Angela Turner would be replaced by a new CEO acceptable to Carlyle. The room held its breath as the chair read the result. Carlyle nodded. With a polite, almost regretful smile, he thanked the board, saying he looked forward to a new chapter of shared vision. Then he gathered his folder and walked out, leaving an empty space where he had stood. When the door closed, A few directors covered their faces with their hands. Others stared at the table in stunned silence. The vice chair said softly, "We did what we had to do." The director who had defended Angela looked up, tears in her eyes. She whispered, "We just let bias win." The chair cleared his throat and called for calm. He asked the secretary to draft the removal notice immediately. They agreed to announce the change by noon, hoping to control the news cycle. Angela entered the room again, her posture straight and her voice even. The chair told her the board had voted to accept Carlyle's request. He said he was sorry, but the bank's top priority was client confidence. Angela nodded, her face calm. But inside, she felt a storm of emotion. She asked what would happen next and where she should collect her personal items. The board arranged for a small team to escort her to her office. As she walked down the corridor, she heard whispers and saw worried faces. Had built and the trust she had earned. In her heart, she promised she would not let this moment define her future. The trading floor was alive with the usual hum of activity. Monitors glowed with scrolling numbers, and traders leaned over their desks, eyes fixed on shifting prices. At the center of it all, Jacob Mills, the interim CEO, sat in a glass-walled office overlooking the room. He had only stepped into Angela Turner's shoes a few hours earlier, and already he felt the weight of responsibility pressing on his shoulders. He rubbed his temples, remembering how the board had hurried him into the role to appease Martin Carlyle. Now Carlyle's team was calling for a massive trade, and Jacob knew he had to approve it to heaven, though it seemed risky. In the corner of the room, risk manager Priya Singh watched Jacob through the glass. Priya had worked closely with Angela for years, building the bank's safeguards and stress test models. She believed in checks and balances, in making sure every large position had proper limits. When Angela was removed, Priya's team had been told to stand down on all new approvals for trades above a certain size, pending a review. She had resisted, worrying that a hasty sign-off could let a dangerous exposure slip through. But with Angela gone and Carlyle breathing down their necks, Priya had little choice but to follow orders. A junior trader, Marco, approached Jacob's office with a tablet in hand. His face was tight with tension. "Sir," he began, "Carlyle's team just sent in a request. It's a $500 million derivatives position in the Eurodollar futures market. They want immediate approval, no delays." Marco's voice wavered. He and his colleagues had built safeguards that normally flagged trades of that size for extra review. Without Angela's final sign-off, their system required Jacob's personal email confirmation. "They say it's urgent," Marco added. Jacob glanced at the tablet, reading the summary. The trade looked straightforward. Carlyle's clients wanted to hedge a large position in European bonds ahead of an upcoming policy meeting. But something felt off. The models Priya's team had run last quarter showed that a sudden shift in interest rate expectations could swing the position wildly. He considered calling Priya in, but he remembered the board's warning: keep Carlyle happy or face the cost. He sighed and tapped his email app. "Send the approval," he whispered. His fingers hovered over the send button, then he pressed it. At that exact moment, in the back of the trading floor, Sarah, a senior trader, noticed an alert labeled "Risk Control Disabled." Her heart skipped a beat. She grabbed her headset and called to the operations desk. "I'm seeing that the stop-loss thresholds on this trade aren't active. Why have they been turned off?" Nobody answered for a moment. The room felt suddenly too quiet. On Jacob's screen, a message popped up. "Trade executed." He leaned back, expecting relief, or at least a routine confirmation. Instead, he saw a flashing warning. "Position size exceeds live risk limit." He swallowed hard. He picked up the phone and dialed Priya. "Priya, the control system is showing an override. Did you authorize this?" His voice trembled slightly. Priya answered on the second ring. "Jacob, I didn't touch anything. The system should have flagged the expiration of default controls, but it did not. It looks like somebody bypassed our safety protocols." She paused. "I'm running an emergency test now, but this doesn't look good." Across the floor, Sarah's alert grew into chaos. Traders and risk analysts hurried to their stations, eyes wide. Screen after screen filled with red lines, losses mounting by the thousands, then millions. Sudden. Market announcement Roeup Central Bank had signaled a surprise. Who've sent interest rate expectations soaring within seconds. The massive derivatives position that Carlisle's team had just placed was exposed to this news without any automatic stop-loss in place. The losses began to pile up. Jacob watched, horrified. As the projected loss climbed past 10 million, then 20, then 30, he grabbed his phone again, dialing the operations manager Tomas. Tomas, stop the trade. Cancel the position, he ordered. Tomas's voice came through strained. We can't, sir. The cancel window closed 2 minutes ago. There's no manual override on this platform without Angela's special code. Priya's voice came back on speaker. Hold on, she said. I might be able to route a manual shutdown through the backup system, but I need time to authenticate. Jacob's heart pounded. Do it now, Priya. We're bleeding millions. What? Priya took a breath. I'm on it. Beads of sweat formed. On Jacob's forehead, on the trading floor, the energy shifted from confident bustle to desperate scramble. Phones rang off the hook as traders called counterparties to plead for relief. Sarah ran to Priya's team, shouting, How long until you can override? Priya shouted back, At least 5 more minutes. I need authorization docs. Sarah's face fell. 5 minutes could mean an extra 10 million lost or more. Marco's eyes darted between his screen and Jacob's office. He whispered to a fellow trader, Why did they turn off the risk controls? The other trader shrugged, but suspicion flickered in his eyes. They both knew how Angela had fought for those safeguards. Without them, the bank was dangerously exposed. Meanwhile, Carlisle's representatives strolled into the trading room, congratulating themselves. They were enjoying the excitement. They believed that with Angela gone, the bank would bend to their wishes. They looked at the screens showing the losses, but instead of concern, they saw an opportunity, a chance to press for more concessions. Back in the office, Priya's fingers flew over her keyboard. She bypassed layers of encryption, resetting control modules one by one. Each step required a password or biometric check. Normally, the process took hours. Now, she was hacking through in minutes. She tapped a final command, Activate Global. Stop loss. In the open planned floor, red numbers froze in place. A collective sigh rippled through the room. Losses stopped climbing at $50 million. Sarah let out a breath she had been holding for what felt like an eternity. Traders looked at each other, relief and shock mixing on their faces. Room felt hollow, like a stage after the final act. Jacob closed his eyes for a moment, the adrenaline draining away. He thought of Angela's steady calm in times of crisis. She would have shut this down instantly, made the room breathe again. With clarity, he rubbed his eyes and forced himself to stand. Stepped onto the trading floor, the fluorescent lights harsh overhead. Voices hushed as he walked toward the cluster of screens still showing the losses. He found Sarah and Priya huddled by a monitor. Is it contained? He asked quietly. Priya nodded. Yes, we've restored all risk protocols. The position is locked. We can't lose any more, Sarah added, but without those limits for even 2 minutes, we lost 50 million. And that's not counting market ripple effects. Jacob's mouth felt dry. Call the board, he said. Tell them what happened and notify the regulators. We have to get ahead of this. Sarah shook her head. I want to know why those controls were disabled. Who gave the order? Why did someone override our system? Jacob bit his lip. He wanted to tell her it was Angela's code missing, but that wouldn't explain the override. He had pressed the button. The responsibility was his. He glanced over at Carlisle's side of the room. His representatives were still there, now whispering among themselves. Jacob squared his shoulders. Get me Carlisle's liaison, he said. The traders around him parted like water as he walked back to his office. He felt every eye on his back. Once inside, he locked the door and sat behind the gleaming desk, facing a blinking phone. He picked up the receiver and dialed, his fingers trembling. This is Jacob Mills, he began when the line clicked. We need to discuss the recent trade. We lost 50 million due to a lapse in our risk controls. He paused. I know you'll want an explanation. On the other end, he heard a faint clearing of a throat. We noticed the loss, the voice said. Can you assure me it won't happen again? Jacob swallowed. Yes, he said evenly. We've restored all protocols and are investigating the cause. You have my word it will not recur. He hung up and stared at the phone. He knew those words sounded hollow. The bank's reputation had taken a blow, and Carlyle held the keys. Outside his office, Sarah and Priya waited. Priya spoke first. We need a full audit trail. We must find out who disabled the controls and how. Jacob nodded. Do it. And document everything. We'll need it for regulators and possibly for legal action. Sarah glanced at him. And what about Angela Turner? She always made these calls. Jacob sighed. Angela was out. Took the call. The board forced my hand. I thought I had to act quickly. I see now how dangerous that was. Priya's eyes narrowed. We need to fix this culture. Can't let client pressure override safety. Jacob looked out over the trading floor. The monitor's now quiet. You're right, he said softly. We have to rebuild trust. And we have to find a way to make this right. The trio stood in silence for a moment, the magnitude of the loss hanging between them. Then Priya turned back to her team and began typing furiously, pulling up logs. Sarah picked up the phone to call the board secretary. Jacob sat back, exhaling slowly. He thought of Angela, of her steady hand, and of the moment when he would have to face her again. He knew that rebuilding the bank's strength would take more than capital. It would take the kind of integrity and courage that Angela had shown every day. And he was determined to prove he could find it, even if it meant admitting his own mistakes. The trading floor had fallen into a stunned silence. Screens that once danced with numbers now showed lost figures in red, growing by the second. 5 minutes after Jacob Mills had approved the trade, the bank's position lay exposed to a sudden shift in the foreign exchange market. European rates had spiked, and without any active stop-loss orders, Riverside's multi-million-dollar bet bled red ink. The total loss raced toward $50 million in the glass-walled office overlooking the floor. Jacob pressed his palms against his forehead, felt the weight of every blinking warning light, every frantic call, every whispered panic. Echoing through the room, outside, Priya Singh and her team worked furiously to contain the damage. Priya watched the screens, her face drawn tight with concentration. She had re-engaged the bank's safeguards, but they came too late. She might stop any further bleeding, but the 50 million was gone. Sarah, the senior trader, who had first noticed the disabled controls, stood by the monitors. Her normally confident posture had given way to a tense, almost defeated slump. She stared at one screen showing the line graph of losses shooting upward like a dagger into the bank's balance sheet. She saw the faces of her colleagues turning toward her, their eyes wide and fearful. She wished Angela Turner were here. Angela's calm voice, her quick decisions, her firm belief that protocols must never be overridden. Sarah could have used that leadership now. On the far side of the floor, a group of traders whispered among themselves. One whispered, "How could they let this happen?" Another replied, they needed that approval. Everyone knew the controls were off, but no one wanted to face Carlyle. The tension crackled in the air. Tyra, a junior risk analyst, shrugged and said softly, "We all knew the risk. We all did nothing." Meanwhile, news of the massive loss spread outside the trading room. Word reached the communications team, who had been alerted by the automated loss reporting system. Within minutes, a terse internal memo was drafted. Riverside Community Bank reports an unplanned trading loss of approximately $50 million due to control system failure. Further details to follow. The memo was marked confidential, but leaked almost immediately to an eager financial press. Riverside's stock price began to tumble on the open market. Shareholders grew jittery. In the boardroom, directors were already gathering for an unscheduled emergency meeting. The chair sat at the head of the long table, his face pale beneath the bright lights. He pushed his glasses up his nose and cleared his throat. Around him, other directors exchanged worried glances. Some fingered coffee cups, Others rolled pens between their fingers. The door to the room burst open, and the head of communications strode in. "We have a problem," she said in a low voice that still carried. She placed a printed copy of the leaked memo in front of the chair. "The press has it. It's going to be out there in minutes. The stock is already dropping 2 points." She tapped her finger on the paper. "This looks like a public relations nightmare." The chair's jaw tightened. "How did this happen?" he demanded. "Who's responsible for disabling our risk controls?" The communications chief shook her head. "We don't know yet. We only know the loss is real. We need a statement, fast." Another director chimed in. "We should call Angela Turner. She's the only one with credibility in the market. Her name still carries weight with regulators and investors." The chair hesitated. He glanced at the other directors. "She's no longer our CEO," he said quietly. A director spoke up. "We can bring her in as special advisor. She can say we've learned from this. She can calm the market." The chair rubbed his forehead. He knew the truth. They had dismissed the one person best suited to manage a crisis like this. Back on the trading floor, Jacob Mills stood at the center of the chaos. Priya approached him, her expression a mix of relief and anger. "We've contained it," she said. "The protocols are back in place. No further losses. But the 50 million is gone." Jacob nodded without looking up. He felt like he might be sick, I know, and we need to tell the regulators. And we need to call the board. Priya hesitated. "Jacob, we also need to figure out exactly how the controls were bypassed. There must be a record." Jacob blinked and shook his head. "First things first," he said. "Damage control. Then investigation." He walked toward the communications desk, where 2 associates were drafting a public statement. "Stop what you're writing," he said. They looked up, startled. "We need to court Angela. I want her on a call within the hour." The associates exchanged glances. One said, "She won't speak for us." Jacob pressed a hand to his chest. He took a deep breath. Tell her, she's the only one who can help us now." Meanwhile, Martin Carlisle's team got wind of the loss. Carlisle himself did not panic. He knew that his threat to remove his funds had set this chain of events in motion. Felt a grim satisfaction, a sense that he had the bank on its knees. He sent an email to the board chair. "I see the unexpected loss. I want full compensation, or we will consider legal remedies. Let me know what your plan is." The board chair read the email and felt a wave of dread. He knew Carlisle was not bluffing. Carlisle had the resources to drag them through expensive litigation money they did not have after the loss. The chair called an emergency meeting with the board's legal counsel. They went through the bank's contracts with Carlisle, searching for any clause that could force him to compensate. They found none. Carlisle had the power to withdraw, but no obligation to pay. The chair rubbed his temples. They were trapped. On the trading floor, the atmosphere remained tense. Some traders logged off early, faces etched with worry. Others refused to leave, glued to their screens. Priya paced, making notes. Jacob stood at his office door, watching. He realized the damage was not just financial. It was a blow to trust, to reputation, to every relationship Angela had built. He thought of her calm courage, her clear judgment, her insistence that protocol must always come first. Now he was left picking up the pieces. At precisely 4 o'clock, the communications head sent a brief press release. It read, "Riverside Community Bank today reported an unexpected trading loss of $50 million. Following an internal system override, the bank has restored all risk controls and initiated a full review. Angela Turner, former CEO, has been invited to advise the board during this process." Within seconds, the release hit the wires. News outlets buzzed. Social media lit up with comments. Some investors praised the invitation to bring Angela back. Others wondered why the bank would need her guidance after removing her. Industry analysts began to dissect the mistake, writing about the dangers of letting big clients overrule safety systems. One headline read, "How Riverside's rush to please a top investor led to a $50 million collapse." In a small conference room on the ground floor, Angela Turner sat with her phone in hand. She had just returned to her office after the formal announcement of her ouster. Her desk was cleared of personal items, but she kept her laptop. When she saw the press release, she felt a rush of emotions: validation that the bank needed her, sorrow for the losses, and anger that bias had led to this moment. Yet beneath it all, she felt resolved. She tapped out a reply to the board chairs. Email. I will help. Let's set up a call now. She hit send and leaned back. She knew the bank was in crisis. She knew how to restore order. But she also understood that this recovery would need more than policy fixes. It would demand accountability, culture change, and a clear signal that no one, no matter how influential, could override the bank's integrity. Back at Riverside's headquarters, Jacob Mills ended the day with a final look at the trading floor. Most desks were empty now, lights dimming. He walked past the row of terminals, knowing each represented a team member who had trusted him to keep them safe. He felt the weight of their loss. $50 million, yes, but more than that, the loss of confidence. He paused at Priya's empty chair and whispered, "I'm sorry." He went to his office, closed the door, and stared at the blinking lights on his phone. Carlisle's email still glowed on the screen. "Let me know what your plan is." Jacob took a deep breath, picked up the phone, and dialed the board chair. "We need to meet," he said when the chair answered. "We need a plan, and I think Angela Turner is our key." He paused. "Yes, the same Angela Turner we removed. Time to make that right." As night fell over the city, the lights in Riverside's top floors burned on. Within those walls, leaders would gather, decisions would be made, and the path to recovery would begin. The bank had lost $50 million in 5 minutes, but with Angela's return and a renewed commitment to integrity, they might yet save their reputation and prove that true leadership always belongs to those who put safety before expediency. Angela Turner felt a mix of determination and relief as she walked back into the building she once led. The lobby lights reflected in the polished marble floor, and her low heels clicked in a steady rhythm. She carried a slim folder of documents, and a sense of purpose that had only grown stronger in her brief absence. She headed straight for the emergency meeting room on the top floor, where the board and senior managers waited. As she climbed the final steps, she rehearsed what she would say: admit mistakes, restore trust, and push for real change. The board chair met her at the door, his shoulders tight with stress. He offered a stiff smile. "Angela," he said, "thank you for coming so quickly." She nodded and entered the room where 9 directors and key executives sat around the long table. Jacob Mills and Priya Singh were there too, their faces a mix of relief and lingering tension. Angela closed the door behind her and stood at the head of the table. She felt the eyes of everyone on her. She took a breath and began. "I'm here to help fix what went wrong," she said calmly. "First, let's acknowledge that mistakes happened. Controls were bypassed and we lost $50 million. That loss has shaken confidence in our bank. We need to be honest about our failures and clear about our plan to recover." She set the folder on the table and opened it. "I've prepared a 2-part proposal: immediate actions to stabilize and longer-term steps to rebuild our culture." Angela outlined her first set of moves. She recommended bringing in an independent auditor to review every control process. She suggested pausing any large trades above a certain threshold until the new systems were fully tested. She emphasized clear communication with regulators, offering full transparency rather than waiting for them to demand answers. She proposed regular press briefings to keep the public informed and avoid rumors. Each point was focused on restoring trust quickly. When she paused, Jacob spoke up. "Your plan makes sense," he said, "but we need to act fast. Our stock price is down and clients are watching." Angela nodded. "We will move immediately. I want a temporary trading freeze on all non-essential derivatives trades." "Priya, can your team implement that now?" Priya replied, "Yes, I'll have the freeze in place within the hour." Angela turned to the board members. "I ask you to authorize an emergency capital infusion enough to cover the loss and signal strength to the market. We will use internal reserves and engage our core investors for additional support. The chair flicked through Angela's numbers. We can reallocate funds and secure a line of credit, he agreed. Others nodded. Angela felt the collective energy shift. They were no longer paralyzed by shock. They were ready to act. She moved on to her second set of recommendations, a cultural overhaul. She spoke of the need to remind every employee that no client, no matter how large, could break the rules. She proposed a series of training sessions, town hall meetings, and leadership roundtables to rebuild commitment to the bank's core values. She insisted on clear accountability measures for anyone who tried to override controls in the future. After 2 hours of intense discussion, the board reached consensus. They passed Angela's plan unanimously. As they signed off, the chair looked up at her. "Angela, would you accept the CEO position again?" he asked. She regarded him for a moment, then nodded. "I will, under one condition. We commit to these changes fully, without compromise." The directors agreed, and Angela felt a familiar sense of responsibility settle in her chest. She was back in charge.
Oh.
Angela moved quickly to implement the emergency measures. By midday, trading was frozen for non-critical positions, and regulators were notified of the bank's full transparency. She held a press conference in the atrium, where reporters gathered behind a low barrier. She spoke in clear, simple words. Riverside Community Bank deeply regrets the recent trading loss. We have restored all risk controls and initiated an independent review. I have returned as CEO to lead this effort. We will learn from our errors and emerge stronger. The cameras flashed as she answered a few questions, maintaining her calm focus. Her honesty and confidence helped steady the narrative overnight. Inside the bank, Angela visited the trading floor first. She walked among the desks, greeting traders by name. She listened to their concerns, fear of more freezes, worry about job security, relief that controls were back. She reassured them that the bank valued their expertise and that the temporary freeze was only until new safeguards were fully tested. She thanked Priya and her risk team for their swift work. She reminded everyone that the goal was not to punish, but to protect. Her presence and words calmed the room. Next, she held a town hall meeting with all staff. The cafeteria was filled with people from every department. Angela spoke from a simple wooden podium. "We are in this together," she said. "Our bank stands for community, fairness, and responsibility. We will make sure every process reflects those values. No one person or client can override what is right." She answered questions openly, never shrinking from admitting the bank's failures. Her sincerity resonated with the employees, many of whom had felt anxious or ashamed. When she finished, they gave her a standing ovation. Meanwhile, legal and finance teams worked on the lawsuit against Martin Carlyle. Angela had instructed them to seek recovery of at least part of the loss. After reviewing the client contract, the lawyers identified clauses around good faith dealing that Carlyle may have violated by demanding the removal of the CEO. The team prepared a formal notice of intent to file suit. Angela believed that holding Carlyle accountable was necessary to show other clients that Riverside would not tolerate bad faith threats. Within 2 weeks, the lawsuit was filed. The bank sought to recover $20 million in punitive damages for reputation harm. The legal filing also named unknown individuals responsible for disabling the controls, opening an investigation into possible internal collusion. Angela made it clear that the bank intended to find the root cause and impose consequences if needed. At the same time, the independent auditor released an interim report. It praised the swift actions to restore controls but criticized gaps in escalation procedures and the undue influence of a single client. The report recommended several enhancements, including dual approval requirements and automated alerts. To senior management, whenever controls were bypassed, Angela embraced the findings, ordered immediate implementation, and thanked the auditors for their candid work. Investor confidence slowly returned. The bank's stock, which had plunged after the loss, began to recover as news of Angela's decisive leadership spread. Some institutional investors even increased their holdings, Impressed by her transparency and swift action, customers called branch managers to express support. Community groups praised the bank's outreach and the public apology. 6 months later, Angela scheduled a press event to mark the bank's full recovery. She stood in front of the restored trading floor, now brimming with activity. Priya and Marco, the junior trader who had first warned of disabled controls, stood beside her. She announced that the bank had recovered $30 million through legal action and successful trades, covered $20 million with its reserve line, and improved capital ratios. The derivatives freeze had been lifted after rigorous testing. New policies were in effect. An independent ethics committee had been formed to oversee any future exceptions. Journalists asked about Martin Carlyle. Angela replied, "We believe in fair dealing. A lawsuit is not about punishing one client, but about sending a message. Integrity is non-negotiable." She added that the case was ongoing and that the bank remained open to settlement discussions. After the event, employees cheered and clapped. They saw in Angela's leadership a model of accountability and courage. She walked through the crowd, shaking hands and thanking people personally. Now, many told her how much her return meant not just for the bank's stability, but for morale and trust. In the days that followed, Angela wrote an op-ed in a leading financial magazine. She wrote about the importance of balancing client relationships with risk management, how diversity in leadership could strengthen decision-making, and why transparency was vital in banking. She shared lessons from her own experience, that success depended on integrity, and that a moment of bias could cost far more than money it could cost trust. The piece was widely shared, earning praise for its frankness and insight. Years later, Riverside Community Bank's handling of the crisis became a case study in leadership programs. Angela Turner was invited to speak at conferences about ethical decision-making and crisis management. She never forgot the pain of her removal, or the lesson that bias could undermine any achievement. But she also carried the pride of turning a near catastrophe into a story of resilience and renewal. Under her leadership, the bank grew stronger, more diverse, and more trusted in the community. And every time she walked past the trading floor, she saw not just screens and numbers, but people who had learned that integrity, once restored, could be the greatest asset of all. Ask ChatGPT.